We get a lot of interesting questions as a tribute band. I love it. I do love it. But one of my favorites is always, well, that was a pretty good show, man. Why didn't you do any Sammy Hagar, though? And I tell them the exact truth every single time. I'm not that good of a singer.
Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Roger.
And welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics
on our search to find the middle.
We're going to give you last week's news today.
It's a slogan we should put on the t-shirt.
Stop touching her!
I am tonight announcing my candidacy.
Taylor Swift. Look, my biggest issue with marriage is that I think that it's a fundamentally flawed institution that is built on the oppression of women.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Having truly rational conversations about controversial issues is risky these days.
Andy.
Roger, how are you going?
Oh, man, I must admit I've had a bit of a Christmas event today, so I've had quite a few drinks, and if I'm a little bit sloppy, you'll forgive me.
Always interesting how you perceive yourself, because sometimes I have a few drinks before recording, others I don't, and surprisingly I can't tell which one's a which. So I don't know if that's a good thing. Like, is that I'm just not...
You always feel a bit more self-conscious though, don't you? Because you don't feel that impaired when you are in the moment. But have you ever had the feeling of like going to a party where you're normally drinking, but then you don't, and then you realize like how drunk everyone is, and you feel like the person who's forgotten their swimmers at the pool party because you feel so other. You feel so different from everyone. Well, you're not on their level.
You can't relate to them in the same way.
Yeah, like there's like a real difference there that you can perceive, but obviously they can't.
I think there's a sweet spot with alcohol. There's a certain amount that makes you more, it's like the Dutch courage kind of thing. I don't know, like your verbal fluency increases or maybe just your perceived verbal fluency increases.
I think that's it. It's perceived. It's perceived. When you're in the moment, and then people thinking, oh man, this guy sounding like Kanye West. What's going on? But I mean, what's your feeling of the type of drunk you are now? Because mine's definitely, my like drunk persona has definitely changed as I've aged. Do you have any kind of insight into this yourself?
I don't think I typically go out and get drunk in the same way as I used to, so I can't really compare. Like I don't.
Well, I hope sloppy. Not, given that you used to pour a bottle of Southern Comfort into a 2-litre Coke bottle or something of a similar nature that makes me feel terrible just thinking about it.
No, I just think there's a certain amount that you can have, which gets you to like a nice sweet spot. And once you're at that point, it's good. But once you go past that point, it's not good. So I think, yeah, it's just like maintaining.
But I'm getting to like the point of how would you, okay. If you had to describe your drunk sweet spot persona, what would it be? Like, what does it do for you?
I think it just takes away the part of the brain that inhibits you, like maybe it's a social limiter that you have, like that's inbuilt within you, and it does remove like a layer that is actually, I suppose it achieves some kind of purpose in an evolutionary sense, but like in other settings it's a hindrance, right? And I think in social settings, like it like for some, or certainly for me, like, and everyone's different, it makes me, more energized in social settings than I would be without it, right? So it's something that makes you thrive off engagement with other people in a way that I wouldn't have without alcohol. And then that's quite, alluring.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, like I feel if I had to comment on my own trajectory around my persona when I'm drunk, I feel like when I was much younger and I got drunk, I was just like a ball of fun, like innocent fun, all the things that you're talking about, right? You talk more, loosely, and you come up with tangential things that are comedic, and you're just generally, like a lot of fun. And what I would say is fairly harmless. But then I feel like as I've become older and I've taken on more baggage, I feel like getting drunk is a little bit more risky in terms of social situations where I might think I'm all those things that I mentioned, but actually like I'm offending people, or I'm maybe my EQ is kind of like outstripped the ability for people to absorb, what I'm saying, or I'm offending people, or maybe even perhaps like some of the pent up negative emotions get the better of you, and you just, I don't know, like I think when you drink a little bit too much, right, you lose your inhibitions, and how you really feel, or something that maybe you've repressed, comes to the surface a little bit more. And inevitably, as you get older, you carry more baggage and more you suppress more negative feelings because there's more responsibility on you. And so I feel that is always a challenge to stop that bubbling up. And I never used to feel that when I was younger because maybe life was just a bit easier.
So my takeaway from what you've just said is that you are going to lose your job after your experience tonight at your Christmas party. Is that...
No, I'm conscious of it, right? Like I actually am conscious of it because I went through a period before I discovered this, that if I did get too drunk, I would have it was like that Homer Simpson waking up with a notepad next to the bed of like who I need to apologize to.
Yeah, well, I think in that, so like that's more a lesson in who to like go out drinking with. Like I think if you like in the workplace, I don't think like you completely rule out drinking in the workplace or like after work or whatever, or as part of a Christmas party. Like there's a certain cohort of trusted colleagues that you can go out and do that with, and that's fine. But that's because you're kind of probably more in the realm of like trusted friendships, right? But going to a Christmas party and getting blind, and then doing all those things, and then having to go to work the next day with said people is not a good recipe for success.
It's not always about being blind though. Like I find that sometimes it's actually the rhetoric that gets you in trouble because you're talking about concepts and ideas that are inflammatory, right? It's kind of like...
That's just because you go in podcast mode at the Christmas party.
It's true, right? Like,
what do you think about abortion?
Taking like some of the concepts that we talk about here and giving it to an audience that perhaps is
that's not
warmed up for it.
No,
right?
that is a mistake. Don't do that.
Yeah, dangerous ideas, right? Like, and actually thinking that you can just somehow shove it into the conversation. I've gone wrong there before. I was like, these people find this really interesting, and they're like,
no, they don't.
They don't.
Less is more.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But look, it's one of those things. I think that like finding that altered state and the kind of link with it is something that I feel definitely can be a bit of a challenge.
All right. Well, look, it's that time of year. You've just been to your Christmas party. Are they still called Christmas parties in a corporate setting? Like, because that's a little bit like you can't really have the season's greetings party, can you? Like, it has to be. I mean, it's a Christmas party still, right?
I feel it's really
end of year party.
If I think about the last 5 years, or maybe pre-COVID, Christmas parties, corporate Christmas parties, have totally lost their magic. They have. They're not Christmassy anymore, and then they're so worried about the optics of the situation, especially in big corporates, that they are a shell of their former selves. Is actually I feel about that.
I actually think that's sorry not to get like sidetracked, but I actually think that's really disappointing that in this day and age it's so hard to have a proper celebration as part of. And it's not really a Christmas party in the sense of like celebrating Christmas. It's just like the one chance over a year to, celebrate the end of the year. And it's, there's different contexts at play. Like I think, how much is it going to cost? Like, can you use the company credit card for this, or, oh no, we've all got to chip in out of our own money. Like it's just sucked the life out of it. Oh, alcohol.
But don't you think it's mainly the optics though? It's not really the budget. It's
well, I think sometimes the two are related. Certainly, if you work in government, the optics of spending taxpayers' dollars on a Christmas party doesn't land. But
it's the most egalitarian situation ever, right? Because everyone gets to enjoy it. It's not like based on the hierarchy. And it's kind of like the Sydney fireworks in that respect, that everyone who wants to.
Yeah, but they want to cancel those as well, don't you know?
I do know. And I think it's a shame. Like, I think that like people underestimate these elements of bringing a company or bringing a group of people together. Like, this is how, this can be the spark to ignite like actual bonds that will reap benefits throughout the whole next part of the year, right?
So this is why we need Elon Musk, because he's just going to go and like destroy all of the WHS and, you know, all of the employer-employee obligations and all the rules, all the workplace rules that make HR departments tiptoe around these things. Yeah, like it's, we need a revolution.
Maybe.
All right, well, it is that time of year. The thing that coincides also with Christmas and Christmas party season is we all get that special message in our Spotify accounts, Spotify Wrapped. Now, we're not going to talk about Spotify Wrapped, but we are going to do our own 2024 Wrapped episode for this year. And we're going to bounce through some of the highlights for 2024. And we're going to just have a bit of a surprise discussion. We haven't compared notes before now, so we're going to have a natural, organic conversation about some highlights. You ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to kick off with one that I think will be near and dear to you and your heart, which is 2024 finally saw the opening of the Sydney Metro under the harbour, a feat that's been hyped for what feels like decades. And sure, it's slick, efficient, and makes Sydney feel like one of those elite, world-class Asian cities we all envy. But let's be honest, while we were patting ourselves on the back for digging one tunnel, cities in China were putting us to shame. Shenzhen built an entire subway network of 16 lines since 2004. Us, we took almost the same time to get from Chatswood to Sydenham. A+ for effort, Sydney, B- for speed.
Why is it going to be a competition? I mean, look, to me, the metro is like the ultimate convenience of public transport that no one asked for. Like, I just kind of think like, you know, you said something really good, and or it really hit the mark, I suppose, because it was kind of like all these people who bought out in the suburbs, in these kind of like northwestern suburbs, and took the sacrifice to buy bigger houses and bigger plots because there was no link to public transport. They did that. They made that trade-off. And then all of a sudden, what do? We build this incredible new and advanced metro system that connects all these northwestern suburbs. And I kind of feel like that. I'm like, we're sitting here, and I've been a beneficiary of that, as we've talked about on this podcast. Didn't ask for it. It just kind of came and it happened. Pure luck. And all of a sudden, it's amazing. So I think it's just one of those windfall situations for us. And I kind of treat it like that. I think it's just like a bonus. I'm not, I'm not thinking and judging it as like a piece of utility for Sydney. I'm just thinking, wow, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just like there's a tunnel and a metro service for me to take advantage of. Look, I think that the reality is Sydney is Australia, Sydney, whatever. It's a smaller population base, right? And we are spread out. So those two things are not going to combine to be a truly efficient system for public transport. And public transport is relatively cheap, right? We kind of charge too little for our tickets compared to other developed countries. So, it is what it is. I'm very happy for the metro, but depending on what suburb you're in, like anything in Sydney, which is full of micro markets, there are winners and losers.
So one of the things about Sydney Metro is it links suburbs like Cherrybrook, Castle Hill, Showgrounds. What are some of the other hills? Is it Bella Vista? Rouse Hill, Norwest. All these quite, let's be honest, fairly insular, suburbs to the mayhem of Waterloo, which is the mecca of public housing in Sydney. There's so many of these Soviet era public housing blocks around Waterloo, right? Yeah. And I'm just curious about the notion of people from Waterloo hopping on the metro and coming out and seeing Cherrybrook for the very, very first time, or Castle Hill as tourists.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It's the
one they get off at Chatswood.
It's an artery. Why would you? But in the same vein, why would you come all the way to Rouse Hill, Castle Hill, all these places from the city?
Well,
there's nothing there.
Crime.
There's nothing there for you.
It's people leave their doors unlocked.
Well, there hasn't really been a factor at this point in time. I think it's more the other way. It's like exposing people from the Hills District, which is a relatively, like you said, insular, middle-class existence in the Bible Belt mainly, to places like Waterloo. And I think I've spoken about that too, that I find it quite confronting. Like, I don't love the experience of that because it's very confronting. There's let's be honest, just drinking everywhere, right? That's literally what I see almost every day. And like, there's people that are drunk, and there's like bums, and there's all this kind of stuff, and it's not nice, right? And there's nothing that you can do about that because, like you said, there's big housing stacks there. It's there's a protected area. There's all this kind of stuff going on there that you can't change.
Hey, Roger,
right?
Roger, you're totally wrong. You can do something about it. You knock the towers down and you build new condos for rich middle-class professionals.
I think, look, I don't know whose idea it was to create just like a massive Peachtree-style housing block full of, I mean, what do they think was going to happen?
All right, let's do the next one.
All right. 2024 saw America deep dive even deeper into the political Hunger Games with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris as central figures in the drama. Trump, of course, kept his MAGA megaphone on full blast, sparking endless memes, lawsuits, and debates that made Thanksgiving dinners across the country extra spicy. Meanwhile, Kamala's attempt to carve out her own legacy was met with either jeers or cheers, depending on which echo chamber you visited. If 2004 taught us anything, it's that tribalism isn't a phase, it's a new national sport.
So we've discussed the US election ad nauseum, so I don't think we should have another conversation or open another dialogue on that. But like, even just like at a meta level, like just how fucked that whole thing was, right? And like, just imagine like 10 years ago. So 10 years ago being before Donald Trump was a candidate for, president first time around, like telling yourself 10 years ago that this is what was ahead of you. And you wouldn't believe it. Like, you couldn't write a movie script. Like, it wouldn't get greenlit because it would be so out there, right?
Well, The Simpsons did predict it.
Well, not all of it. I just think we are, and I guess some of the like the unexpected events related, like maybe in some ways there's like, obviously the US election, but there's all these other things as well that have happened that just feel crazy. Like, they just feel, God, we are really in chaos. Like, and I think just if I think back to our upbringing, like we grew up in a period of probably unprecedented stability. Like, the Cold War ended in our early childhood. We, grew up in this sort of era of like US domination, and we were part of that world as well. And it seemed like we were prosperous. We had, in Australia, we had
Nintendo 64s.
But 3 decades of consecutive economic growth. We had, it was like the golden era for Australia and for certainly the Western world. And you had the Francis Fukuyama end of history line, and look, we won, the West won, and I think we are well and truly, we've hit the brick wall again, or it's probably a reversion to the mean. Like, this is more normal, like this kind of instability. But I think we've really now pushed against the limits of liberal democracy, and I think a lot of that's to do with social media and tribalism, and I think we're just not as smart as we gave ourselves credit for.
I think that you're right. We have hit a brick wall. I think that's a really good way to base the conversation, because I think that we've hit bedrock in terms of what we believe, what we maybe were led to believe was a linear progress, linear kind of progression towards ever and ever more advancement, ever more liberalism and enlightenment. And I think that we've proven that. We've proven that with all the roadblocks and kind of like tripping over ourselves. And
did you just say Roblox?
Roblox?
Roblox.
Roblox. My slurring, sorry. The funny on a tangent, my daughter said that, "Oh, Daddy, I want to play Roblox." My friends play it. I'm like, and then I typed into my phone, "Is Roblox safe for kids?" I said, "No, it is definitely not safe." Anyway, So look, I think that I actually truly believe that looking back, and it didn't feel like this when we were kids, but looking back on it, the generation that got to experience GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 when they were teenagers probably lived through the most innocent and prosperous period of like recent history. I truly believe that. I think that like if you were a teenager, like somewhere between as low as 12 and as high as maybe like 16, and you got to experience playing Nintendo 64 unironically with your friends on a Nintendo, you were like, that's peak existence of human. Like I reckon when they look back on human history, that'll be the time that they base like the peak of humanity on, right? Because it was just so, like you said, it was so innocent. There was nothing going on. It was just pure, like unadulterated childhood, right? And I have to say, like, I think things started going wrong. You say social media, but I actually go a little bit further back than that. I go to reality TV. I go to the Jersey Shore. I go to all these kind of reality TVs that made the public fall in love with the lowest instinct of trashy human emotions. And if you look at where Donald Trump has come from, it's The Apprentice. And it's exactly the same vibe. Reality TV has primed us for the most primal garbage instincts of the human mind. And that addiction to drama, conflict, the normalization of dysfunction has led us here.
I'm going to go and say I don't think it's a reality TV. I'm going to go against you and say I think reality TV...
It's the first time it was celebrated.
Yeah, but I think the fundamental difference now is the ability for people to, not share a common outlook of the world, like not to be looking out the same window. Like people are reading their own social media feed, which reinforces their own stereotypes and views of the world, and they're more siloed in their own media landscape. And I think that's, it amplified. I mean, we had it before with, 20 years ago, people would have said the same thing with News Corp. They would have said, "Oh, the News Corp media, they're this right wing or whatever."
But maybe that was the call before the virus, right? But if there's no reality TV, there's no Apprentice, there's no Donald Trump, there's no
but there would just be someone else. We would have someone else that would. I mean, he's a particularly unique and novel figure that like fit the bill. So perhaps there's some like great man history part of it, but like at the same time, I think the trends, they had that whole Tea Party shit like before Donald Trump, like
that was principled.
Low taxes, but like you did have this like this is all roads are leading to this kind of siloed universe. You have Brexit in the UK. This is a similar phenomenon. Like it's just allowed people to separate in there, and I think it's the reason you have someone like Donald Trump elected is the same reason you have like woke politics, extreme woke, kind of crazy extreme ideals about on the left, which basically say that, because amongst them they see their peers and they go, okay, well that's who I hang out with, and this is totally normal to say this stuff. So I'm going to go a little bit more left than them because that's how I that's how I identify, and then suddenly you get people saying all sorts of crazy shit. So I think that's just.
Don't you think there was a moment though, Andy, where, like, say, take a figure like Kim Kardashian, where people were actually stuck on the fact that like she is famous for being famous, and that is not right. And actually, she should be hated for that. Like,
I just think it's a different phenomenon. I think it's a different phenomenon. I don't think it's the phenomenon that gives rise to Donald Trump and Brexit. Honestly, I don't.
I think there's only one reason why people are primed to accept behavior like Donald Trump's, and it's because of a slow march that started with reality TV and ended with social media.
No, I don't think necessarily that. I think Donald Trump gets away with everything he gets away with because, like, his value proposition to his supporters isn't that he's an upstanding citizen. It's that he's either like a troll to, the elites or incumbents or left or whatever. Or like, I think that almost endears him to his audience as and that's why he's immune to it. So yeah, I don't know, but let's park the election and let's move on to brighter horizons. And so I'm going to go up next. 2024 will forever be remembered as the year Taylor Swift wasn't just on tour; she was a global phenomenon. The The Eras Tour took over stadiums, streaming charts, and group chats, with Swifties leading to a run-on sequins and Spotlight running out of crafting jewels. But it wouldn't be a triumph without a dose of tall poppy syndrome. Halfway through, we all turned on her. Too famous, too talented, too many exes. She's a distraction at the Super Bowl, and even the US Open. And then December hit, and she dominated everyone Spotify Wrapped, even the bloke who only listens to respectable boomer rock.
You know what was really funny is actually when I looked at my Spotify Wrapped, guess who was my number one? Old Swift banger. And at that point, I started to wonder.
How did she get into yours?
Is this just a giant psyops? Because there's no explanation, right? There's no explanation. Like,
did you get a special message from Taylor Swift?
I did. I was a top fan, and I got it. And look,
is that you or is that kids?
No. Like, look, even factoring in my daughter, who's a Swiftie and stuff like that, there's just no possible way. There's no possible way that Taylor Swift would have been my top played artist. Like, I just don't understand.
So it's a conspiracy.
It's like it's like a psyop. And I got a message from her in her sequin leotard, and this is like the equivalent of U2 downloading their album onto every iPhone. Like, I just don't believe it. Like, something's gone wrong with the algorithm, with the Spotify algorithm, right?
So just out of curiosity, in what percentage of top fans were you?
I was in the 8%.
8%, okay. 8% of top fans, that's pretty extreme.
What were you?
Oh, I don't remember, but like I could probably rationalize it, but
I seriously haven't. Like, I haven't listened to. It's just not possible. It is not possible that I have listened to that much. Even the times when my daughter has listened to it, it's just not possible. And I don't know what's going on. It's an error. An error. Look, I think that the problem with Taylor Swift and hating on Taylor Swift is that she is undeniably talented, right? And actually, when you peel back the layers of who she is and how she behaves, she's unbelievably mild and professional. So she's actually like a very small target to hate on, right? It's like literally all that you can hate on is her success. And I think that is eventually going to,
But actually being a small target, it actually at some point ceases to become a small target. It actually eventually becomes a big target, because if you're the global phenomenon that you are as Taylor Swift, people expect you to stand for something, because they know, like, people know deep down inside that she does have views about the world, but she doesn't express them because she doesn't want criticism. And like, she endorsed Kamala Harris in the election, but she wouldn't. She wouldn't have, or at least according to her, she wouldn't have, if not for her being sort of forced and compelled to by like the statements from Donald Trump. So, like the fact that her default was not to express a view on this big thing, like that she, like, according to her message, like felt so passionate about. And even still, she didn't actually go all in on Kamala Harris. She just sort of said, look, all I want you to do is vote. So it wasn't like, it was still like one of these, just, and maybe, look, that's actually
That was totally neutral, man.
Well, that's tactfully like the right way to do it, and it's strategically probably as well for her. But like, it was a very PR kind of thing, right? It was even still like, and I think people do want public figures to stand for something, and I think like she's probably reached a point where, just her like benignness, if that's a word, actually is what makes people sort of criticize her for, because it doesn't ring true, right? It doesn't. No one, you can't honestly believe that she doesn't have opinions on all this stuff, and the act of her keeping it to herself, like, it just seems very commercial, as opposed to, if you are opinionated on these things, like, don't pretend that you're just this vacuous nothingness, right? Like, so anyway, but and also like there's just like the saturation. It's not just hers. Well, it's, I guess, related to her success, but like the saturation of it. Media starts looking for blood the moment someone's as saturated as she was. So yeah. So I think we're past peak Swift now, but it was
it's the only way, right? It's the only way. Like, she has to now, she has to kind of shrink into the shadows a little bit now, for longevity's sake, right? And then come back. Like, you can't keep being in the forefront continually. Like, it doesn't work. Like, Stardom doesn't work that way,
Yeah.
in my opinion. All right. 2024 was the year Starbucks officially became Gen Z's therapy office. Forget the coffee. It was all about the vibes. Custom orders with 17 objectives, TikTokers filming quiet luxury hauls with pumpkin spice in hand, and Green Mermaid logo becoming the shorthand for I'm just surviving. Gen Z rebranded Starbucks as their go-to safe place, where the ice, matcha, and existential crisis followed in equal measure. And let's be honest, no one can juggle emotional burnout and a venti caramel cold brew quite like they can. We have come in and out of Gen Z. We've quite quitting office culture and their drive and resilience, all being under the spotlight. What do you think 2024 has granted us? Have Gen Z's stock risen in value or declined?
Well, you haven't thrilled me with the Starbucks revival being a Gen Z thing. I kind of feel sorry for Gen Z a little bit because I do feel like they're probably like the first/last generation where I think it probably realistically has dawned on them that you can't buy your own house. Like, this is not going to happen. Maybe you can get like a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom unit or something, but like the dream of, and not just home ownership, like I think that's still within reach, like especially, you get 2 working people in a household, a couple that's working or whatever. It's very much within reach. But like the dream, the Australian dream of a house with, a 3 or 4-bedroom house with a pool and all that sort of stuff and a backyard that isn't like 2 hours away from where you work, that's dead for that generation, truly. Like, and I think for our...
Is it?
I think it is, yeah. For our generation, the unit was always the stepping stone, right? So yeah, we couldn't get the house straight away and all that sort of stuff, but it was a realistic stepping stone to get to that next level. But I think if you're, Gen Z, I'm just trying to think what ages we're talking about here, but like, let's say you're 25 now, right? I think genuinely, house prices in Sydney, for a house, a median house is what, 1 point.
Yeah, but they start with the apartment.
Yeah, start with an apartment, but like...
So they could pick up an apartment for, what, $850?
Yeah, but then that's...
Graduates working at a corporate earning probably $90.
Yeah, but how do you make the next step up? Like, how do you...
So you get $50 from your parents and you save aggressive... Like, it's...
You can get a unit, but like...
But we all started with units.
But the capital growth, like, we're not building more homes. Like if anything, the housing stock, like, of houses is declining because, okay, well, maybe it's increasing out, like, 2 hours away in some...
But the metro at Rouse Hill now.
Yeah, but they're not really growing around Rouse Hill anymore, right? Are they? Like, there's like, yeah, okay, like maybe plus another half an hour from Rouse Hill, there's more homes being built, but like that then reaches the limit of like you can't get to, like, at least when we were that age, Rouse Hill was this new suburb that you could buy in Rouse Hill, and even then it would be far away, but hey, it's going to have a metro. That doesn't exist anymore because Rouse Hill's all sold. And then now they're building suburbs out even further away with no transport. And same down south and, wherever else, right? And then you've got, like, so let's say then the existing kind of inner city suburbs, or at least, within the broader metropolitan area, and you have, houses being demolished to build units and apartments. So there's actually declining sort of housing stock now. So I don't know. I just think that's like that for Gen Z, and I know this is about coffee and now we're talking about housing, but Gen Z is, I think that has an effect on their motivation. So if you can't buy a house, buy a coffee.
I don't know, man. Like, I just kind of think sometimes, is it just more about priorities, right? Like, I think that
that's boomer
I feel
talk.
like the housing. No. I'm not talking about avocado and coffee. I'm just thinking about like the hangover of what you actually think success looks like. What's the god to a non-believer? If you don't believe success is attributed to home ownership, if you don't have that kind of drive inside you that you can't really explain, but you kind of want your piece of the action, like, is it more that? Or you can say that they don't feel that way because they can no longer afford it, but is there something else going on too? I don't know.
I think it does fundamentally change. Well, okay, so just to make a point, like the point isn't that it's impossible. The point is that it's much less possible than it was, right? So it's a spectrum, right? And there's no way. Like it's in the same.
No, I'm not arguing that.
But like in the same way as like for boomers, buying a house was let's say twice as or half as easy. I don't know whatever the right way of putting it is than it was for generations that followed them. In the same way, there's almost like another halving or doubling, whichever way you want to go. And I think that's kind of like cold comfort to say, oh well, it's just priorities and all that, because I think the reward line is different.
I'm just saying, is that what they want though?
Yeah, but I think they don't want it because it's just too hard. Like I think people, when the price of bananas goes up, you don't buy bananas, you buy something else, right? And I think that's what's happening. There's a substitution effect.
But if all your friends don't eat bananas, then what do you care?
Well, you have financial security to worry about. You have how you're going to house yourself when you're older. You've got, just the general, like, certainly in terms of a career, like you've got what do you need like a career for now? Like if you're not buying into the Australian, like this is something that's like motivated Australians for like a century, is this idea.
Maybe we're the ones that are on the rat race is what that's what we've explored before, right? Like have we got that carrot dangling over us and it's actually obscene and it's not actually a good thing.
So there's like a happy medium, I think. Like there's, okay, it's great to be like, not treat your career and your financial situation as like your whole life, and that you have a more balanced life, and there's like an optimal like in the middle medium. But at the same time, like you do need to pull your finger out if you don't want to be impoverished when you're 75 years old. So and I think that's the hard thing, right? Like I'll give you a good example, right? I worked with someone who when they were on their graduate salary, they decided to buy on the Central Coast on a graduate salary. And this is going back now, 15 years ago, and they were earning 30 grand, right? And he said to me that he made that choice because that was really important to him. So they bought a fibro shack on the Central Coast when he was a graduate earning 30 grand. And he said that there were some nights where he literally just had to eat baked beans and tuna. And he had to do that for the first 3 years. Now, that is sacrifice. And that's a relatively young bloke, not too much older than us. Would you do that? Should you do that? I think that we're getting into legitimate questions around the dedication and what drives you to make sacrifices early with either the hope of an easier life later on, or perhaps just because that's what you're made of. That's your constitution. And I think these are like questions to grapple with, right? Like that is sometimes a difference. Like for my parents, there was a little bit of that. And like that's a choice, right? And like, is that choice out of necessity? Is it out of your constitution? Like, what is it, right? And in the same way, some people sacrifice like their 20s, 30s, 40s to live like millionaires when they're in their 50s. Yeah, but
like,
but what you're forgetting is you don't need a house if you've got a Starbucks downstairs. Like you can just go get you.
Well, they all closed apparently. But okay, going back to the coffee though, and this idea of like whether Gen Z stock is rising or falling, I think that the reckoning is coming, that they have to find their place pretty soon, right? Because I think the Gen Z is starting to head towards their 30s, right? And we all know that there are certain realities that come in, and especially for like couples in their 30s, right? So I think I'm making a prediction that in the next 2 years we'll see some real changes on views, and that will cause waves. That will cause waves in lots of different ways.
So one of the sort of defining characteristics of the Sydney housing market over the last decade has been that houses have gone up crazy in price, right? And one of the things that's unique to the last maybe year or 2 years is that apartments now have started to increase. Apartments are sort of catching up a bit, and I think that is that segment of the market because that's the only segment that, Gen Zs can sort of buy, right? And you probably also have some downsizing of boomers as well. So,
that's the other X factor, right?
Yeah, but I mean, the thing
is, daddy and mummy's money has to go somewhere.
Yeah, but see, boomers don't like to downsize. They like to live in their 5-bedroom house so that...
I think there's a certain type of boomer who wants to spend it all on cruises and getting tan like a turkey, but
they want to come back to their 5-bedroom house after.
Like, I actually do think that a lot of it just passes through. Yeah. They will.
Yeah, well, we'll see. All right. Up next, 2024 might just be the year we found liquid perfection in a can. Suntory Double Lemon. How did they do it? Just 122 calories, a zesty explosion of citrus, and a solid 6% alcohol content. It's the drink that says, I care about my waistline, but I also want to party. Look, we're not here to promote unhealthy habits, but when the alternative is a beer belly and regret, isn't this the smarter choice? Honestly, if health experts tried one, they'd probably agree. Suntory Double Lemon, the drink, beer, wishes it could be.
You're on fire, Andy. I think that there's something magical about the first 196 that you have, because if you're a responsible adult, you're drinking like 4% beer or the occasional like wine and spirits and stuff, right? That's very regulated. So when you have something that like throws caution to the wind and is up at 6%, like it's magical. You're on like that magic carpet ride. It's almost like chasing that first high when you had a beer when you were a kid, right? Like that's how I felt. I think I was like messaging you like, oh my God, I'm getting drunk off like one Suntory 196, and it just hits you differently. It reminds me, it throws back to when you're a kid and you're drinking Smirnoff Double Blacks or, you know, Tui's Extras and things like that, whereas actually it just gets you there. It gives you that kind of feeling, and it is so satisfying. It's so, I mean, it tastes so refreshing. And I think that when you're our age, you start to like lose, like you don't give a fuck anymore about like what you drink or what you eat. So you don't really have like any hang-ups about like what's the right thing to drink or eat. So yes, fully endorse this. I love it. Still mad at Kevin Rudd on the Alco Pops tax, but yeah, it should be. They should be way more popular than they are.
I think they are popular. I mean, they've, as a segment, I'm sure they've been around for some time, but like I do feel like they've hit a critical mass now of like mainstream popularity.
Not at bars though.
Not at bars, but definitely like in the liquor store or whatever. I mean, even Aldi sell them. So it's a bit like Aldi selling Vegemite. Like they that's just one product they can't emulate themselves, so they have to stock the original. So they have the Suntory Double Lemon in Aldi. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to overplay. Like, look, if you haven't had this drink, just go and have one again. just try it.
It's not about the calories, though. Let's be honest. It's like it's nothing to do with the calories.
I actually think one of the, and I'm not sure which one sort of popularized. It's probably actually a little bit of both, like in a feedback loop. But you remember when like they introduced hard solo, or I think they call it like solo alcoholic or whatever. Or something. Anyway, and then they changed the name, but they, you know, this hard solo thing. Now, I think hard solo was probably a reaction to this product getting a bit of steam, but then I think the mere fact of like hard solo being a household name in Australia actually even further popularized this category. But just as an aside, like hard solo is shit. It's just so sugary, and it's just like it makes you feel sick. Like it makes you feel like you're ingesting diabetes in a can. Whereas this is like right. So smooth. It's so like you don't feel that sickly, sugary flavor. And for that reason, I do think it is the calories, like partly because like when I drink those hard solos, I know that like this is the equivalent of drinking like a 10-pack of like just regular solo, like in one sitting. Like you just wouldn't do that. You just couldn't do that for the sugar alone, let alone any alcohol in it.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I'm trying to think back in the day, like I think it was like lemon ruskies. It was those kind of things, like UDLs, lemon ruskies, those vodka spritzers, those kind of things, and they were, you know, really popular, especially with women, and a few mates of ours. So look, I think it's one of those. I love it. It's just that, you know, it's nostalgic for me. I do totally tip my hat to the refreshing nature. They've just got the acidity right, that it tastes sweet, but it's not sweet. And it just that's just a gift. So yes, definitely not promoting alcohol, but we kind of are. Go try it. It only comes in a 4-pack, and you understand why.
Oh, 10-pack.
Buy the 4-pack first.
All right.
Okay. From hard solo to something else. 2024 was the year Ozempic officially became the Beyonce Knowles of medications. Everybody wanted it, but not everyone could get it. Originally for diabetes, it became the ultimate weight loss flex, sparking debates about body image, privilege, and whether there's anything that can't be bought. Pharmacies ran out of it faster than a pub's last round, while social media turned it into both a miracle and a meme. Meanwhile, doctors begs, can we please just use it as it's prescribed?
Have you seen Sharon Osbourne recently?
I have. I was just actually thinking, what comes to mind when you think Ozempic face? And she's on the list. Who is that Indian lady from The Office?
Oh, I haven't seen her recently. I know who you mean, but
yeah,
I'm going to throw one more name in. Axl Rose. I reckon he's had a bit of an Ozempic.
I mean, look, I always thought this day would come where there was a pill. I just thought it was would be a pill, like an actual pill that you swallowed, and it would just kind of mean that you wouldn't have to eat. And at the time, we're living in the future now. Like this is the reality of it. So if people don't know how it works, obviously you have the injection of a certain amount, and it just takes away all feelings of hunger. And even worse than that, if you do try to eat, you will feel so unbelievably full that you can only have like a bite of food.
So just to be clear, because I don't fully understand how it works. So it's not so much that it's this thing that just makes fat melt away, or disappear magically.
Not at all.
It's purely about it has the effect of constraining calorie intake.
It suppresses the hunger hormone, so you don't feel hungry. And when you try to eat, you feel disgustingly full, so you can only eat a bite. And the net result is you have hardly any calories. And this is what causes the Ozempic face, because this is probably one of the worst ways to lose body weight.
So it's like a crash. It's a crash diet, right? Like it's the equivalent of crash diet.
Yeah, it's like the way to ingest a severely restricted calorific intake. But what comes with that, as most people know nowadays, is if you're not weight training and you're not having protein and all this kind of stuff, you are losing both muscle mass or lean muscle tissue along with fat at probably a pretty unfavorable ratio, which is the opposite of what you want. You want to maintain as much structure and muscle mass as you can and slowly lose fat so you don't have pockets of, And the other thing about it is that, what it's showing with Ozempic face is that you don't get to choose where your body metabolizes the fat first. And it can be in very unfortunate places in your body. Like you can lose it from your face and your neck and your other parts that you don't want to lose it from. And then your beer gut last, right? And so I think this is one of the things why this is actually a medication to help people who are severely overweight deal with their diabetes and all these kind of things. Like this is not a recreational thing. But anyway.
So just for the education of our listeners, do you take one injection and that serves you over a period of time, or do you have to keep taking it regularly?
You have to keep injecting. You keep injecting yourself.
On a daily basis or a weekly, monthly?
Depends on your dose. From what I understand, it's multiple times a week, and depending on your dose.
Okay, but you can't get it in Australia.
You can get it in Australia. You can get it. We were hit with the whole shortage, like anyone else around the globe, and then compounding pharmacies started trying to replicate it, and we actually had all sorts of problems with that too, of off-brand versions of it being potentially deadly. We actually had in Sydney one of the most prolific illegal compounding chemists that's now, I believe, in jail. And it caused all sorts of problems for people injecting that into their body. But now there are licensed alternatives to Ozempic is what I understand.
All right. Well, I've never had Ozempic. And have you had Ozempic?
No.
Oh, you weren't as quickly out the box there to say no. As I thought you were.
What I was thinking of, Andy, is everyone says that they wouldn't do these things, right? Have these cosmetic procedures or take these drugs. But if you're honest with yourself, isn't the only reason you wouldn't do it because you're worried that it wouldn't leave you in a better shape or the consequences? If someone gave you a guarantee that you could get the result that you wanted, wouldn't you take it?
I think, given the effectiveness of most diets hinge on some sort of calorie restriction, that this in some ways isn't like, I mean, we were talking before on this podcast about like the 1 meal a day diet, right? I mean, that pretty much is the same thing, only without injections, right? In some ways, like in a different way, but like the essence of it is the same. So I'm going to move us along. One of the highlights of 2024 was when Andy and Roger caught Jump, the Van Halen cover band. That, let's be real, was way better than we expected. These guys had all the energy, swagger, and spandex Van Halen did back in the day, and they weren't even alive for the Van Hager years. It got us thinking, are cover bands proof that rock is dead, or do they mark a maturity phase by keeping the classics alive for generations to come?
It was one of those rare moments in life where you're treated to something beyond your expectations. And I got a feeling that maybe you knew a little bit it was going to be like that, but I had no idea. I just kind of was, just a happy-go-lucky guy coming into that ticket. So it really blew me away. And I think, to your point, there's a certain magic about seeing these kind of bands live that people who have experienced it have like, not like a pity, but they just to have this kind of thing where they tell you you had to be there. And so when you see a band like this and it takes you to an experience, a live experience that you're not used to seeing, it is really valuable. Like I will say that actually, like, trying to recreate what it was like to see, the Beatles live in Munich, or Van Halen, or all these things, like these moments in time where they're very fleeting. They're only there for a very small period of time. And once it's gone, it's kind of gone. And especially with bands, right? Bands change, things happen, age happens, life happens. And so when you see like a faithful recreation or homage and the celebration of it, and it's this real positive energy because it's like this homage and it's full of fans and it's full of positive energy, it is amazing. And I think the problem is, on the other side, cover bands can be so bad. It can be like, so it's like the extremes of experience, right? Like cover bands are the worst. They can be like literally the worst, like where it crosses over into like, oh my God, this is like a bad talent show karaoke night. And to like, oh my God, this is like the Pink Floyd experience. And this is actually even more truthful to the recreation, the recreation of the event than, that is humanly possible. And you can have those experiences back to back, which we kind of did. Like, not to throw shade, but what was it? The Appetite. What was the Guns N' Roses cover band? The opener.
Appetite for Distortion or something like that.
Something like that. But it was fun. It was fun. But come on, like it was. It was like trying to paint a really hairy man and pose it as a gorilla in a zoo. Like it wasn't going to work. It was amusing, but it was just. Yeah.
I think what was amazing about this Van Halen cover band was actually, I mean, musically they sounded like bang on, but it was actually just that, well, they were young, but they were like probably like all of the raw qualities that Van Halen would have had, I imagine, because I never saw them. I've never seen the actual band live. Back in the day, they had it. Like they actually had that. Like the lead singer was like, had all the. I mean, it might have all been emulated. So in that sense, it's like not real. But like he had the whole like thing down pat. Like he had the character. Like he lived and breathed the character such that like it wasn't just him acting in a play. It was like he would have the instincts to, engage, and he had all the moves down, and he was very fit as well. Like, so he was doing all the
super physical. Yeah. Like physicality about it.
And a good singer as well at the same time as doing all these crazy moves. And then, by the way, all the musicians were bang on as well. And so in some ways, because I think what can happen with cover bands is it's like a caricature of the original, whereas they actually pulled off the original. Like it was almost a little bit like you were seeing, I don't know, it's almost like the Rami Malek in Queen. Like you see a good portrayal that you let yourself believe it because it's not like a cartoon of it. It's actually close to the real.
Bit is though the hard bit is, Andy, is like the reality of most cover bands is they're usually old. Like they're actually usually quite like middle-aged to old people.
Because young people go and start their own bands.
Exactly right. So there's a dual edge here, right? Like you're kind of like, oh my God, this guy's like really talented. And should he not be kind of giving this a go for his own music? But he's chosen to push his like artistic energy into this project, right? So it's kind of like, wow, like you believe it because it's a young person and they're fit and all this kind of stuff. But then you're kind of like, oh, yeah, but they're so talented, you kind of almost wonder, like, why aren't they giving it a go? So it's that kind of weird thing, right? Like that most cover bands are like Elvis impersonators, where it's like, let's try to find the, like, they don't really look like them. They're trying their best to do it.
But do you know,
like them or whatever it is.
do you know, like, what can happen is they, like, people doing the whole cover band thing can, like, hide behind almost like as a protection mechanism, the audacity of it. Like, they can hide behind, like, I'm going to go, like, almost comedic with this because then people don't think I'm taking this seriously. Because if you take it seriously and you don't pull it off, then that's egg on your face. But these guys took it seriously and they pulled it off and they nailed it. And it was an absolute pleasure to watch.
It also showed me, like, you know, you hear this all the time, again, by people who've seen an actual live creation, where it's like, you had to be there. It's like they're a live band and it doesn't translate to the recording. They said that all the time about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, right? Like back in the day in the LA scene, it's like they're a live band. And actually at the time, they're like, I don't think that they will ever have success as recording artists because so much about their show is about the physicality. It's about the interaction with the crowd, the kind of raw athleticism about how they're jumping on Flea and Anthony are jumping around and stuff. And this kind of made that connection to me too, where it's like, you could lose a lot of this, like a lot, like way over 50% of this by listening to the record. Like you just wouldn't get it, right? And you wouldn't understand it. You're like, okay, Jump sounds like a bit of a cheesy like tune, but actually when you see it all there and like, it's very, very different. So yeah, I'll give it that. 2024's cost of living crunch turned everyone into amateur survivalists with a flair for the absurd and penny pinching. There were certain hacks that are worth mentioning, such as showering at the gym to dodge rising water bills on the rise, and some people living off Costco samples to make their meals work. What's your view of the most ridiculous cost-saving effects? Have we taken things too far? Do we just need to rein in our streaming accounts?
Do you shower at work?
Well, I think that, like, if you shower at work, it should be either as like an end of trip situation or perhaps you've gone to the gym. Now, look, I think this has always been challenging. And I think I've admitted this in a bit of an awkward way where, like, the cost of living thing, I don't really see in the ways that you want from me. I don't see. Like, I don't go to the supermarket and go, oh my God, butter has tripled in price. Like, actually, like, I haven't felt that, right? Like, I haven't been shocked by the price of everyday items, like in the way that the news media wants me to believe. Like, and to the point where I'm like, I'm pretty sure that like the prices of some vegetables are going down. Like avocados are super cheap. Asparagus is like $1.50 a bunch. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I like the news wants you to believe that it's all in the supermarket basket, and it's not. Like, it's other things. It's like rent. It's like housing costs. It's utilities. It's things like that, right? But I don't know. It's an interesting one for me because some of this penny pinching is very dependent on your circumstance, and it probably goes back to what you were talking about, which is your home ownership status and whether you've been affected maybe by like job insecurity or something.
Roger, that was the most appalling politician response I've ever heard. Do you shower at work?
No, I don't shower at work.
No, look, I think I don't really agree with that because I think there's no way you can. Well, I mean, if you're objective about it, you might not have noticed it because it hasn't hit you in the back pocket or whatever. But like
do you go to the supermarket and be like, wow?
Yeah, there's like heaps of shit that's gone up in price. Like it's clearly gone up in price. Like at the supermarket, like there's just in whichever way you want to cut it, it's like it's 20-30% more expensive than it was a few years ago, right? So, but like you're right, it's other items. So as like the supermarket has like some proportion of an impact, but I think like hospitality, like going restaurants and cafes, that's like way more expensive. Stuff like that's gone up. But all of this is like how sensitive your household budget is to these sorts of changes, right? Because, like, you know, your food expenditure in the supermarket is probably a smaller proportion of your expenses than for other households, right? If you're a high income household, the supermarket bill is going to be a relatively low percentage of your budget. But if you're a low income household, it's going to be actually a relatively high proportion of your budget. And so you really do notice those changes, right? Those price changes. And maybe the other impact is like a lot of Australian households have gone from maybe middle income households to lower income households off the back of, or at least the equivalent, when you adjust for, like, say, increase interest rates and rent. So households that used to be sort of fairly robust in terms of their budgets, like, suddenly had to find like $200 a week, which for some people is like a lot of money. So, and then when you've got that amidst, you know, increasing grocery prices or fuel prices or whatever else, it's hard. Like, so people really do notice it.
Yeah, of course. What I was trying to say is just more dependent on your circumstance. And when I say circumstance, I don't necessarily mean like how much income you earn, but it's how your finances are structured. And this is why, like, sometimes it doesn't help talking about these things across the board, right? Like, if you're someone who is leveraged up to the hilt, but you also have a portfolio of properties, you can be incredibly strapped for cash, right? But you're working towards something very good, you know, and other people who have zero responsibilities and everything's disposable. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, like, yeah, like I don't feel too bad about eating out like every night because it fits in the pocket, right? And I'm not building towards anything and I don't care about that right now. So I just think that, like, sometimes this cost of living thing, like, you can talk about the stats and the numbers, but some of it, there's more going on.
I think it's the change. It's not, and like, the numbers are the numbers, right? I mean, the reason it's cost of living crisis is because inflation has been higher than it's ever been in decades, right? So, like, it has been, like, prices have gone up, like, the numbers are 100% clear. Like, you know, we probably had in the last 3 years more inflation than we've had in the 10 years before it. Like, that's, so, you know, you condense that effect into 3 years and suddenly people kind of really feel it, and that's what's happened. So, yeah, I think it's real, and I do think it's people notice losses. Like, people don't notice gains. Like, people don't notice, you know, like, we had very low inflation before COVID, like, comparatively. Like, in fact, I think the, you know, CPI was below the inflation target for not an insignificant period of time prior to the pandemic. And no one at that point was saying, oh, look, giddy up, you know, our cost of living hasn't gone up. That's wonderful. But they notice it when that changes, right? But you'll be glad to hear, or you would have noted, I'm sure, that the minutes from the RBA's latest meeting indicated they have increasing confidence that inflation is returning to the target range. So, yeah, we might get some rate cuts coming.
Finally. All right, play us out, Andy.
All right, honourable mention. I'm just gonna give this anecdote because it was too good not to mention. I was at walking down Sydney on George Street earlier tonight. You know, Sydney's rocking when you see ageing trannies who forgot to put their wig on. Sydney was abuzz amid Christmas party season, and trannies in a cute dress, no wig, bald. Just
yes.
Actually, it was worse than bald. It was actually one of those.
Oh no, the fried tux.
What's the ancient Greek philosopher haircut with the big bald patch and the side?
Yeah, Socrates.
Yeah, the Socrates cut. You know, so it was.
The only thing he knows is that he knows nothing at all. You know, are you allowed to say trannies anymore, though, Andy?
I think it's a term of endearment, isn't it?
It is at the Thai restaurant. Do you have any...
A gender-diverse individual.
Gender-diverse, yeah. Very good, very good. Yeah, let's actually regret that we haven't gone there. That's probably one of the few topics that we haven't gone to.
All right, well,
Don't you think?
we'll park that in for 2025.
I hope you guys have enjoyed your time here with us tonight, man. We really appreciate it. In 1986, man, Singing Hagar was asking a very specific question. He was asking, why can't this be love, right? Well, in 1978, what was David Lee Roth saying? He was saying, I ain't talking about love! Cindy, thank you guys so fucking much for the night. Remember, man.